Okay, so hey guys, and welcome back to another Axel 72 video, and in today's video I'm going to be giving my prediction for the Christian Medina versus Adrian Curiel fight. And so if you are new around here and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so, like the video if you do indeed like the video, and feel free to join the Patreon. I believe this is going to be coming out at the start of February, so the deal for 75% off will no longer be a thing, but you can still join the Patreon and you can request any kind of combat sporting related content, and I will try my best to get it out there for you guys. I appreciate all the support which I've had with it recently. There's been plenty of good videos that have come as a result of the Patreon. You can also use Patreon for betting tips or just general betting advice, and I appreciate it very much. Of course, the link will be in the description. Let's get straight into this one now, and this is quite a random fight, I feel, and the fact that it's a Matchroom card on a Friday night in February in Mexico without an undercard yet announced at the moment of recording. I'm recording this about a week and a half in advance, so you know there's still time for an undercard to be announced, but it's a random thing in my opinion. It's not really been pushed very much, but it's been mentioned a little bit. You know, there's been an announcement of Medina getting signed with Matchroom and then the fight being announced. But other than that, there's not really been much talk about it at the moment. Medina, out of nowhere really, has got announced as a new Matchroom signing. And to pick up a new world champion is good for sure. I just think it's really random because there's been a few world champions who have been around in the lower weight divisions that have kind of come out of nowhere and haven't really got a major deal, and then have just been able to find fights here and there, and none of them have really kind of been associated or even looked at by being signed by Matchroom, at least from an outsider's perspective looking in. So why Medina? I mean, maybe they needed to make more events in Mexico. Maybe there was, you know, there's a big DAZN Mexican market, and I know they like to put on events there, and they've got the big Nunez versus Navarrete fight coming up soon, and maybe, you know, there's a need for more Mexican talent and more Mexican events, with the likes of Canelo kind of not really fighting that much, and maybe at the back end of his career, you know, there is a need for a new Mexican push. Or maybe they really do just see something in Medina. I mean, last time out he did get a great win against Yoshiki Takai, stopping the champion in his home country in very impressive fashion to get the biggest win on his resume, and it was a very impressive win as well. I mean, Takai was somebody in which I was never really fully sold on. That was especially after the Higa fight. Obviously, Higa's given, since fighting Takai, a lot of problems to, you know, the top guys in Antonio Vargas and Seiya Satsumi in the Bantamweight division. But Takai arguably, you know, did lose that fight in my opinion, or at least, you know, it was a close fight and he looked weak at times, he looked vulnerable at times. And I thought if he faced a Mexican or just a tough guy, he would struggle because his physicality just looked like he couldn't deal with it. And lo and behold, he couldn't. I mean, I didn't think Medina would be that Mexican to be able to do that. Maybe I did underestimate him a bit, but still, it was a very impressive performance and a big knockout victory. Again, like I say, in Japan as well. It was a big moment for him, and now he's getting this, which is just a clear homecoming for me, for him, which is of course great to see. Obviously, when most fighters get a homecoming, it normally is against, on paper, a lesser opponent, which is kind of the mindset in which I have for this fight. But still, like I say, nonetheless, I mean, Medina's had to work hard fighting in Mexico in some tough fights, and of course, there's had a couple of times where he's had to fight out in Japan as well. And, you know, obviously last time it went in his favour. It's not always gone in his favour, but it's still nice to see, like I say, the champions getting to reap the rewards. There's a few champions out there. I mean, Salas is another champion in the Bantamweight division who I feel like could be getting this same kind of level of attention, getting put on big Matchroom shows and getting that push, but he's just not, again, making me question why pick Christian Medina. But nonetheless, it would be interesting to see the plan and the route that they have with Medina if he can keep on winning. I'm not sure though how I feel about Curiel getting another title shot. That's another thing in which I feel like is quite random and weird about this fight. Obviously, he is technically a former world champion in the light flyweight division after he knocked out Nontshinga in very crazy fashion. and obviously the way that he won the belt was very dramatic, but I feel like Matchroom are just giving him all the opportunities from winning that first fight versus Nontshinga. Obviously, he didn't need to go and take the rematch against Nontshinga, at least from what I believe. I don't think there was a rematch clause there. I might be wrong, there might have been, but obviously he went on to fight Nontshinga again, and Nontshinga basically fought his fight and then knocked him out which was in a bit strange fashion again. I mean, he had him hurt on quite a few occasions and he was just slumped up against the ropes, but the actual stoppage itself, Nontshinga really didn't land anything, and then the ref kind of jumped in, which was a bit random, but like I said, he was definitely still hurt. And then he got given, off the back of that, he got to move up into I believe it was the super flyweight division, to get a big opportunity in Sonny Edwards' return fight. I believe it was his return fight from the Jesse Van Rodriguez loss, in which Curiel did lose quite convincingly after headbutting Edwards and then making it go to a technical decision. But now he's had 2 fights in Mexico against low-level opponents, and now he's moved up in weight again, and now gets a fight for a title shot, which is obviously, in my opinion, very strange. Like I mentioned, homecoming fights normally are against lesser opponents, but the fact that he's been able to just jump it up in weight and get all these opportunities is something in which, again, like I say, not many Mexican fighters just get given on a plate, and I just don't know if he really deserves. I mean, he deserved, well, he didn't really deserve, he basically had to fight the rematch with Nontshinga, and then the Edwards fight he did deserve because he gave Nontshinga the rematch, but then losing both of them quite convincingly, you wouldn't then make the argument that he then deserves a title shot in a weight division above, in which, you know, he hasn't fought in the bantamweight division at all. I mean, you got to remember, he was a world champion in the light flyweight division. There's obviously the flyweight, the super flyweight, and then now the bantamweight division. So that's a big, gap between the 2 weight divisions. And I just feel like he's getting a kind of special treatment because he's moved up and he's got put straight in number 10 in the WBO rankings. And again, I just don't really know why or how, or if it's really fair, because there is a few other guys in the WBO rankings in which I would have preferred and probably would have been fairer to give a title shot. I mean, there's 2 undefeated Americans. There's also Andrew Kane as well, who hasn't got a fight, but he's fighting somebody in which isn't really a big name on that Nick Ball Figueroa undercard, but he could have been fighting, possibly for a world title here against a bigger name. There's also Estrada, who's ranked highly, who obviously not that long ago had a loss to Bam Rodriguez, but I'm hearing that they're trying to make Estrada versus Nasukawa, which is an interesting fight. But, there's a few names in which I felt could have been given the opportunity to fight instead of Curiel here. But, like I say, nonetheless, it's going to be an interesting fight. I think it has the potential to be an exciting fight, but I think it is down to what version of, especially Curiel, we get, because he could make it a little bit slower, or at least less output if Curiel just starts covering up a lot. But again, we will see. Medina, as a fighter though, he's got a tight guard, so does Curiel. He steps into his punches nicely. The way that he stepped into his punches against Takei really broke him down and really just was brutal, and he couldn't deal with that. He was able to get his foot on the inside really nicely to be able to get through again and really get into his punches on Takei and put a lot of force behind his punches. He finds his way to get in close. He's got good body to head combinations and is willing to take a backward step still if necessary, which is again a bit of a development upon the Mexican style, not just pure aggressive pressure. Curiel is a bit more like that, whereas Medina is willing to take a backward step if needs be to then, like I say, reset and just try and come again. He pins you up against the ropes well, and he's got good power. I think he's definitely the more powerful than that of Curiel. Curiel, obviously, when he got his knockout against Nontshinga, it was a big moment, but it's a very surprising moment because Curiel was never really known for being a huge puncher. I think maybe he went into their second fight with Nontshinga thinking that he was a bigger puncher than he actually was. But Medina, in my opinion, is the more naturally powerful out of the 2. He fights in the phone booth well without really getting hit that clean. So does Medina. I mean, I watched a few of his fights, and a couple of his fights he's just been close in the pocket with his opponents, and he's got a good sense of defense whilst in close. He knows where the punches are coming, and he does get hit, and he does take punches, especially when throwing. But when he wants to be defensive in the pocket, he can slip and slide shots and not really get caught. And again, that's a bit more of a cleaner thing than I feel like Curiel has got. Negatives about him: he's flat-footed. He doesn't really use much of a setup in the way of kind of working a jab or anything like that. But again, both of these things are the same with Curiel. He can sometimes duck his knees instead of timing a shot. Sometimes he tries to load up and just time the right hook continuously, which can become predictable. But sometimes, like I say, he just ducks his knees, which if you get caught out doing that, then you're heavily off balance, and then you can get knocked over pretty easily doing that. He takes the give at a mid-range. Again, he is at least willing to throw at a mid-range, but he's definitely taking a lot more punishment when he is at a mid-range. But Curiel doesn't really throw that much at a mid-range. He fights out of any bad position. He doesn't really try and move his way out, even though, like I say, he is willing to take that backward step. He will then, of course, like I say, try and fight his way out of a bad spot. He can rush to finish, and he can take a little while to kind of switch up the shots when he's trying to hurt you. So basically, if he's going for the finish, he'll just go hook, 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 and then not try and switch into anything else. It took a while for him to do that against Takei. He could have knocked out Takei earlier if he would have, gone to the body, gone to the head. He does do it, but it's just when he's rushing his work, he just starts throwing hooks continuously, and it's just a little bit messy and a little bit all over the place, where if he calmed it down, switches things up a little bit, then he could land a lot cleaner and actually really punish his opponents a lot more. And of course, like I mentioned, he does take punches when he's throwing. Curiel as a fighter, he's explosive. I think that's what we learned heavily from the shock win in which he got against Nontshinga. He's got a tight guard, constant pressure. That's pretty much about him. He wants to keep the tempo going and close the distance, and he's able to close the distance pretty fast as well. He's got good big body shot placements, placed well, with a good pairing, which he's often able to throw it with. He'll throw the body shot and then follow it up with one or two more of the same shot. Well, sometimes he does, and when he does, it's really good, but I would like to see him maybe do it a little bit more. He controls the centre well, which again will be interesting to see if he can do that well continuously against Medina. He's comfortable in close. He can push you back. He's a smaller guy physically, but he can push you back, and he typically does try and make you fight his fight. Nontshinga fought his fight and knocked him out. Edwards didn't really fight his fight, but also couldn't really fight his own fight too well because he was continuously just trying to move out the way of Curiel. But he does make you fight his fight typically, and that's when he's best, if he can make you do that. He's got good short shots, and he does continuously kind of just chop away his work. Negatives about him: he definitely can be made to follow. I think that was what was learnt with Edwards. He doesn't really deal with movers too well. He's not really able to slow you down that well unless he can knock you out suddenly. And he can be frustrated as well. I think that was another thing that was learnt in the Edwards fight. But, of course, Edwards has always been known for having really good movement, especially when he was in his prime. So it's no real surprise that he couldn't really slow him down. He walks onto a lot of shots. He can be moved off by punches who box and move. He loads up too long. He can lean his head in, which is again can lead to causing damage to just headbutting opponents genuinely. He's not using much of a setup either. He's not really throwing at a mid-range, where I feel like Medina is more willing to. He's flat-footed as well, and he only really throws big in the pocket. He has moments where he will just throw singles and big singles in the pocket, and it's just not doing as much. And I think that's when Nontshinga in the second fight again was able to have a bit more success, because Nontshinga would throw 2 or 3 and Curiel would think he was at power punch and could just throw 1 and get away with it, whereas he didn't. And he did, slowly start to throw more and more, but at that point I think it was, getting later and later into the fight, and then of course Nontshinga was able to knock him out. So maybe if he would have been able to throw a little bit more consistently earlier, then it would have gone into his favour. Who do I think is going to win this fight? I think that Christian Medina is going to be able to win via a TKO in round 6. I don't think Curiel was majorly, damaged from that fight in the Nontshinga second fight. He was hurt, but he wasn't majorly hurt. I think in this fight, it's going to go back and forth a bit, but I think Medina, like I say, has a bit more to his game. He can throw more at the mid-range. He's the more powerful out of the two. I think, like I say, he's willing to take a stepwards back. And then I think in the pocket as well, he's better defensively. Curiel's got a tight guard, but Medina actually defensively is a bit more aware in close instead of, like I say, just leaning continuously his head in. And I think he'll be able to work more. I'd like to see him, like I say, switch up the ankles a bit more earlier to then catch and open up Curiel's guard. But I still think, like I say, the power at some point will back up Curiel and then knock him out. TKO him on the ropes. Probably again just a barrage of punches of some kind, like I say, will disrupt him and knock him out. And then who can go on to fight next? Medina. Like I mentioned, there is a couple of good undefeated American fighters. I think one of them is called Angeletti, 14-0. Andrew Kane, like I touched upon, would be a good name after his fight, if he can get through his next fight. Salas, like I've mentioned again, that would be a real good fight as well. An all Mexican unification in the bantamweight division, that would just be exciting to see. Or Masuda is ranked well with the WBO. He's a Japanese fighter, and he's just recently been announced at the time of recording that he's going to be facing Donaire. And the winner of that could go on to possibly fight Christian Medina. I don't know if Donaire wants to go down the WBO route, but I know that he wants to fight for a world title again, and he has just fought Satsumi in what was a very close fight. So maybe he could, either get a rematch with Satsumi or possibly a title shot if he can get ranked in a good position against Medina. But again, maybe if Estrada fights Nasukawa, then possibly they could go down a Medina route as well. I don't feel like it will be too long before some kind of name is coming along and really knocking on the door of Medina. At least I think so. But yeah, that is it for today's video. Hope you did enjoy. Like video if you didn't, like video, subscribe if you're new, and thanks for watching.